Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Daily Racing Form YouTube. I'm Gino Buccola alongside David Aragona. We're going to head on out to Gulfstream Park to take a look at one of the graded stakes races for Saturday, Pegasus World Cup Day. David, they have 7 graded stakes races on the card. There's another that used to be a graded stakes that's no longer. There's a couple synthetic races that are as good as stakes races. So it's a loaded day. Let's go out and take a look at some of these fillies and mares. They're going to be going along on the turf. We've got some of the turf marathoners here. And I think some of the major players, Beautiful Love, came off of a career best performance, win a close fourth in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf. That was better than anything she had done in her previous 3 starts in North America. Also, Chop Chop has been very good at this level and at this distance and stretching out, becoming more of this turf marathoner. I think Lahana, another one that just makes a lot of sense at the level as we take a look at the second page here of the runners.
Yeah, haven't yet seen the morning line for this race, but I would imagine that the number 5 Beautiful Love is going to go favored, as you mentioned it. Her last race in the Breeders' Cup, if she is able to repeat that here, I think everyone is running for second. We'll see if she can duplicate it because it certainly was an improvement on her prior form. But I think what's most interesting about this race is that you've got this Charlie Appleby runner. I think he's sending 3 of them in total over to this Pegasus World Cup Day card on Saturday, and Beautiful Love looks like the one they'll have to get around.
See what Timeform US thinks as far as the pace shape of this race. They have Shiloh's Mistress up front. No surprise. I've seen this one out in Southern California, had her forwardly placed a few different times. But when you have a distance race like this, you'll have a lot of these horses who have gone a little bit shorter. So naturally, they may just be a little quicker with the slower early pace. So you can have certain riders get aggressive a lot of the times too. Well, I'm kind of curious when we have turf marathon races like this because paces can be a little bit different than what we might look at when we see the projector.
Yeah, there definitely is not a ton of speed in this race. Shiloh's Mistress, I suppose, could be forwardly placed as she stretches out to the marathon. The number 6 Marksman Queen has led in some of her prior routes in the past. She was not really intended to go to the front last time, but another rival kind of conceded the lead to her. So maybe she winds up on the front once again if nobody else really wants to go. But I don't expect them to be burning up the turf on the lead here.
Now, let's meet this field inside to outside here. What makes it a little tough to handicap, too, you have 6 of them that exit a common race, too. And you'll find that throughout the card at Gulfstream Park because a lot of these horses that are based down there at Gulfstream and local, they've been facing each other a few different times. So let's start out with the one Shiloh's Mistress, grade 3 place, David. Last out winner has one of the lower buyer tops in the field, though. So I just feel like we'll have to really improve, but maybe the advantage or maybe this horse can take advantage of there not being a whole lot of pace in here and hang around for a slice.
Yeah, she comes out of an allowance victory last time at Churchill. It was a hard fought victory. She battled all the way to the wire, beating a field that is clearly inferior to this one. She's never gone this far before, so maybe she's a horse that's always been looking to go longer distances. She has run her fastest buyer of 87 when she went the longest distance she's tried at Kentucky Downs last year. That was a mile and 5/16. So if she gets clear up front, maybe she's able to take them a long way on the front end. But as you mentioned, she just has to improve a little bit.
David, let's move to the number 2, What Loves Looks Like. This one is a New York bred stakes winner and actually has run into some really sharp company as of late. You look at Be Your Best, who has won back-to-back graded stakes races after not having one in quite some time. And then prior to that, Moon Age Dream, who you see in multiple races because that one has won 3 consecutive New York bred stakes in a row. So where does this one stack up with this group going much longer on the turf?
Yeah, she's tried a marathon distance a couple of times before, both in the Long Island Stakes in consecutive years back in 2023, and then most recently her last start where she settled for 5th behind Be Your Best, who we'll see in the Pegasus World Cup Filly and Mare Turf later on this card. I thought she got a decent trip last time. She kind of rated in the 2 to 3 path every step of the way. That was a day you wanted to be more towards the inside at Aqueduct, just didn't really finish it off. She hasn't visited the winner's circle in a long time, not since the summer of 2023. So at this level, I feel like she'd have to produce a career best. And I'm not sure we're going to see that now that she's a 6-year-old mare.
Number 3, Chop Chop, is now in the Pletcher barn. She was actually favored back in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies after she was a runner-up in the Grade 1 Alcibiades, but most of her form overall has been on the turf. She's always really been more of a turf horse. Now she's recently been kind of reinvented as a turf marathon horse. And when you look at her last 6 races in 2024, going about a mile and a half, 1 toss at Kentucky Downs, the other 5, couple graded stakes wins at a mile and a half. She was second twice at a mile and 3/8 in a mile and a half. She was third at a mile and a half. So, David, she's become really solid at this trip.
She really has. I mean, she's shown a lot of versatility throughout her career, but as you mentioned, she's really kind of found her niche late in her career going these turf marathon distances. And while she hasn't won a ton of them this year, I feel like she's run well even in defeat several times. In the Glens Falls three back at Saratoga, she arguably moved a little bit too soon after a wide trip that day, got caught at the end. And here, this race that we're taking a look at in the Dowager, her most recent start, is able to hold off Forever After All, who she'll be facing against here, and looks like one of the main players in this race. And Chop Chop was up stalking that pace, was able to hold off that rival late. So she clearly has the stamina to handle this mile-and-a-half distance. Interesting that the prior connection sold her. She went for $900,000 at Keeneland November, bought by Mike Rapoli and transferred to Todd Pletcher. I don't know if a trainer switch from Brad Cox to Todd Pletcher is a lateral move or a slight negative move, given how much success Brad Cox has. Feels weird to say that about Todd Pletcher,
Right,
but
yeah.
Todd does not have the best numbers off trainer switches on the turf.
Something to keep an eye on for a horse who will probably be a shortish price in this field. Lahana, multiple graded stakes winner, grade one placed, just really honest, comes off of a win in that Via Borghese, so beat, what, five of these other rivals in this race that we're going to look at right here, David. Just a solid effort, and she feels really solid. She'll probably have to face a couple tougher rivals in this race, though, but she already has defeated one of them before in Beautiful Love. She's actually gotten the better of that rival previously.
Yeah, and she got a great ride and trip from Kendrick Carmouche when she beat Beautiful Love in the way of three back. The three play that we took a look at, I thought she ran really well to win that
Yeah.
Via Borghese. I mean, watching that race, you always love races like that where all the horses are coming back in the same spot. You can analyze the trip, see who's going to improve or run worse based on the trips they got in the prior race. And I thought La Mahana did a lot of heavy lifting that day, going three wide around the first two turns, two wide around the final turn, making the first move to take that race over. That can be a tough trip to pull in a turf marathon, and she still was able to hold on at the end. I thought it was a really strong performance. The one issue with her is that she broke well last time and got into position. That's not always the case with her. Sometimes she's a bit slow that first step out of the starting gate. And if that's the case here, she could get shuffled pretty far back in this large field.
Yeah, that was a really similar note that I had. It didn't feel like a type of trip you normally win with going long on the grass like that.
Mhm.
So I thought it was a pretty game effort just to kind of keep out in the clear. And Davis, who was aboard for the win last time out, riding really well to start at Gulfstream Park. We move on to Beautiful Love, one of the major players in here. Probably a little disappointing in her first couple of starts in North America. She did win the Jockey Club Oaks. She was 7-2 that day. She certainly didn't get bet like a lot of the Appleby runners get bet. So she didn't really have that resume when she came over. And when she was in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf, she went off at almost 30-1. So she was dismissed by many because going into that race based on speed figures, she was just a little bit light, but she came up with her career best effort. She was fourth. She was only beaten a length. She was really in a nice position throughout. She kind of held her position down on the rail. She drew post one. So she just stayed inside, saved a lot of ground, and you can see her, David, in the replay, angling out a little bit. She has every opportunity here. She gets some room, just not quite able to close with the top three in the Filly and Mare Turf of the Breeders' Cup. That's not really all that bad, finishing fourth in here.
Yeah, I mean, if this were any other race, you might say, well, she got a perfect trip and didn't really finish it off at the end. But then you look at who she was running against that day, the likes of Moira, Cinderella's Dream, Didia. She beat More Like Goddess. I mean, if she runs back to a race like that, this field is going to be in for a world of hurt. I thought she was an underlay at 29-1 going into the Breeders' Cup. She just looked overmatched on paper, but she really stepped up her game. And then you go back and reassess her way, where she was beaten by La Mahana. That was the day where you wanted to be inside at Aqueduct, and she was 2 to 3 wide around every turn. Actually ran really well to only get beaten just over a length in there. She might be the kind of Charlie Appleby horse that is just improving a lot at the right time. No surprise, a newly turned 4-year-old. I think she's going to run pretty well in here.
Let's talk about the number 6, Marksman Queen, grade 3 placed. Should be forwardly placed in here, but has been third in the last couple races and has been behind one of the rivals who always loves to finish second in Forever After All. So Marksman Queen, maybe, David, she can take advantage of the fact that there's not much early speed in here because she's probably naturally quicker and going to be more forward than a lot of them in here.
Yeah, I think that's her best hope, to try to get forward, slow down the pace, and see if they come running late. It was a really strange trip last time in the
Yeah.
Via Borghese because it didn't seem like Jorge Ruiz was intent on going to the front early. Another jockey actually secured the front end. It looked like he was in the driver's seat to just back down the pace and go gate to wire. But that jockey suddenly, coming off the first turn, seemed like he realized his trainer gave him instructions not to be in front because he was intent on getting that horse off the lead. And it sort of allowed Marksman Queen to inherit the front end, and she was able to lead into the stretch, got swallowed up by Lahana and Forever After All late. It was a decent effort. I think she's going to have to run better to beat this field, though.
Reminded me of a harness race. There's a little give and go in that from Marksman Queen there as we move on to Lady Firefoot. I think just looking back at the last running line and seeing that this horse was 43-1 when facing five other rivals in that common race, and probably has to face an even tougher group here with horses like Beautiful Love and Chop Chop on top of the rivals they faced. Just think that this one's a little bit overmatched.
Yeah, this horse can post a big priced upset. I mean, she wanted 52-1 three back at Aqueduct, but she's continued to step up in class since then. And yeah, she was pretty wide around the final turn of the Via Borghese, but didn't do much running in the stretch that day. So she's going to have to really improve.
The next one up, Bellatos Beach, will make her second start in North America. This was actually a horse who had some pretty good success. It was a Group 1 winner over in Argentina. Sort of ran like a horse who may have needed the race a little bit and had not run from April to December. So we could be pretty forgiving about that effort. Could you see this one stepping up, second start off the bench, second time in North America and contending with this group?
Yeah, I find her Argentinian form a little tough to gauge from a quality standpoint. Her first start in the U.S. in the Via Borghese, as you mentioned, it was okay. I mean, she was rated towards the back of the pack, picked up some pieces late, but never really looked like a threat that day. Maybe she's going to improve second off the layoff, but let's remember, she's a 7-year-old mare. It's not like she's some 4-year-old coming in from South America. So I wonder how much upside there really is here.
Yada is a horse who's coming in with a lot of her form shorter. Basically, all of her form is about a mile and a 16th or so. So now we're going to see this one stretch out a little bit, probably a little more forwardly placed than where we've seen her being a deeper closer. But most of her races, David, just based on speed figures alone, even if you're not going back and watching the replays and stuff, she's going to have to get a little bit faster to compete with the top tier and the top contenders in here.
Yeah, if this race had come up a little bit softer, I would have tried to make a better case for this horse because
Agree.
her form is steadily improving. And I think a lot of these progeny of Yoshida that we're seeing are starting to really get better at the end of their 3-year-olds into 4-year-old seasons, just late developing types. And watching her run, she's got this rangy stride to her. She feels like a horse that would want added distance that she's finally getting here. She just has to improve so much to beat a field at this quality.
Forever After All has been the beaten favorite in her last two. She's been the runner up in her last three. She is a 10-time runner up in her career in 21 starts, but she just doesn't win a whole lot. Just the two victories. She's 0 for her last 9, multiple graded stakes placed. I mean, she's a really nice measuring stick for this field, David, because she's pushed some of the major contenders to the limits in here. Even looking at Chop Chop, Lahana, she was right there on the wire with both of those, and they'll probably be two of the top 3 betting choices in this race, or 3 or 4. But she's just so hard to trust on the win end because we've seen her settle for the minor awards so many times.
Yeah, and the connections seem really opposed to just trying a second level allowance race. She won her
Yeah.
first level allowance, and they've run her in 9 consecutive stakes races since then. And like you said, she's run well a number of times and has come close to winning, just can't seem to get over that hump and visit the winner's circle. She was pretty unlucky not to get the victory too back in the red carpet at Del Mar, where she got totally steadied around the far turn, actually fouled by a rival that day. Marksman Queen, I believe, was the one, and was able to come on to beat that horse, but ultimately settled for second. Ran just fine behind La Mahana last time, but she's going to have to improve a little bit on that performance to beat this field, and a little hard to trust her on the win end.
Queen Regent is multiple graded stakes placed in the last 2 races we've seen her. They were both going a little bit shorter, though. And the only times we've seen her going longer, she was beaten double-digit lengths in the 2 races going a mile and a half. So probably better now than when we saw her try that before earlier on in her career. But you don't really have a whole lot of form to go off of. There's not a whole lot of sample size there to see how this one would be in the marathon like route distances.
Yeah, and handicapping this race, I feel like I spent a lot of time trying to make bigger priced horses that I didn't ultimately go for, and Queen
Yeah,
Regent was one of them
agree.
because she's shown hints of talent since coming to this country, and it feels like Brendan Walsh and the connections are trying to figure her out because she was a total mess when they tried to stretch her out to a mile and a half at Keeneland in her second start in this country. Got really rank, made a middle move that day. I noticed they changed her bridle after that race. They kind of went to a figure 8 bridle, and she seemed much more relaxed in the last couple of starts, but she still didn't run quite well enough to make her a major player in this race. And now she's drawing on an outside post, and a horse like this needs to get cover early to relax. So I wonder what kind of trip she's going to get.
The last one we'll talk about, Avenue Neil, has some speed figures that would be pretty close to being competitive with some of the faster in here. Just going through the recent races, hasn't been able to outfinish some of the rivals in this particular spots. Was well behind a few of these in that common race on December the 26th. A couple starts back was again behind Lahana and Beautiful Love. What are some of your thoughts on Avenue Neil rounding out this field?
Yeah, she was a $210,000 purchase at the Keeneland November sale, but Mike Trombetta got her from a pretty good turf marathon trainer in Christophe Clement, and hard to believe Clement didn't get the best out of this filly, and she just kind of hit her ceiling at that 89 buyer level. Last time, first off, the trainer switched to the new connections. I didn't see the major excuse for her in the Via Borghese, and now she's drawn in the far outside post.
The also eligible Gilded Edge will draw into the field if anyone here scratches. Let's move to selections for the La Prevoyante. David, let's start with you. Who are you going to put on top in this one?
Beautiful Love is not the kind of horse that I typically take, and not the kind of horse that I'd be dying to bet in a spot like this, because Charlie Appleby typically takes money with these kinds of horses. But she just feels like the type to me that really was hitting her stride at the end of her 3-year-old season. And I believe that Breeders' Cup performance is probably closer to where she's at now than any of her first few starts in North America. And if she runs back to anything close to that, this field is just going to be running for second.
I've been really impressed with Chop Chop since they've stretched her out to these longer races. If you just eliminate that race at Kentucky Downs, it's a tricky track. A lot of horses just don't really take to it. The other 5 races all around this trip are really, really solid. The 4, La Mahana, very good at this level against a lot of these foes. Beautiful Love, super logical. Maybe Marksman Queen can be a horse who can just get a little more of a comfortable trip. As you were pointing out, I think you described it really well. It was just sort of strange, it was kind of give and go in that one. So 3, 4, 5, 6 for me. Best of luck in race number 7 on Saturday at Gulfstream Park.